This video has been sponsored by Squarespace. If you need a website, go to squarespace.com/Heaton.
So I've come to this beautiful woodland. It's in Northumberland. I've been here a few times and I'm just starting to learn and explore and get myself familiar with it. We are early October, so autumn is well on its way, but there's a problem with autumn in the UK, and that is that whilst we're never guaranteed a good turning of colour, you know, it's never guaranteed that those colours will really pop. If and when they do, there is always a second risk, and that is that basically the jet stream at this time of year is like a conveyor belt for storm systems, and that brings these storms over to the UK just one after the other all through winter. And if we're lucky, we get a nice period of calm weather through autumn, and all of the leaves turn beautiful colours and stay hanging there for us photographers to come and pick off with our cameras. But what happens more often than not, and what's happening right now, is that these storms blow through just like today and blow all of the leaves off the trees before they've even had a chance to turn and really shine. So yeah, I'm struggling today, as I do every year, with weather, light, conditions, wind. I can't have another failed video. Last week the video was bad. You know, I'll hold my hands up. Bit of a shocker. I don't want that to happen today. Not that I'm making excuses. It sounds like I'm making excuses, but it's not. It's the truth. You look at any good woodland photograph out there, any good kind of autumnal little quiet scene, you look at it, one thing or two things that they all have in common is the main one, mist, and the other one is light. So mist and light filtering through the mist, beautiful mist, hiding everything, you know, softening the scene, making it look ethereal. And the truth of the matter is, on days like today where it's windy, a bit overcast, a bit sunny, there's no real heavy rain, no dampness, no atmosphere, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And I'm very lucky. I'm a full-time landscape photographer, and I still struggle to find those days. They seem so few and far between. And for 10 years, for more than 10 years, I worked a full-time 9-to-5 job, so I know how frustrating it is to only be able to get out once or twice a week, and to have conditions like this, and then when you're sat in the office you get the beautiful mist and everything like that. It's painful, I know, and I could definitely relate to that. And actually, that's kind of what I'm experiencing now, because although I am full-time, it's still hard for me to get. It's not like I just get out every day, but I do have to put out a video every week. And you know, if like this video that I'm filming now here today is going to go out in a couple of days, right? And the conditions are terrible. Now that's probably my fault for not, you know, getting a nice back catalogue of videos ready to go out, but I don't always like to do that. I like to be a bit more spontaneous. But yeah, it's not really paying off. So yeah, but all is not lost, because I do have an idea. I have a vision, you know. I have an idea for an image that will work, and it's pretty much going to turn this video into a processing video. And I think it's something that I can, yeah, I don't know, I can't guarantee this. I've still got to find the right subject for this idea to work, but I can see it in my mind. I wish we could B-roll inside my head so I can show you what I'm thinking. But on a day like today, I'm going to try to make the most of it and find one subject in amongst all of this woodland, and then if I find the subject, it all becomes about the processing. And I think with what I've got in mind, that although there is no magic and atmosphere here today, I think we can create that magic and atmosphere. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it if I find it, and then you can go and you can do it. It's good fun. It gets you out in the woods, it gets you looking, it gets you thinking, it gets you searching, it gets your juices flowing. So for those days that aren't full of beautiful mist, light and atmosphere, and even colour, I'm surprised now. We're sort of well into October and the colours still haven't fully popped. I mean, you see all the green behind me, that should be brown. So, let me see if I can articulate what I'm thinking. Let me see. We'll go for a walk and we'll see if we can, figure it out. Alright, so see if I can explain what I'm looking for. This is the tarn, this is a beautiful area. This whole woodland's beautiful, but as I said before, it really does need the mist for it to really work, and there is so much potential, and when we get those conditions I will be back. There are images here, but not on a day like today. What I'm looking for is a splash of colour, something like this. I spotted this just earlier on. You see this tree? I don't know if it picks up in the GoPro, but there's like one tree. Let me see if we can see it better from over here. Maybe just there, in amongst all this tree. There's not much colour, but then we have this one, looks like a birch that's starting to turn. That's what I'm looking for, a young sapling, a small tree, a shining light in an otherwise dull, colourless woodland. If I can just find one tree that's on the turn, that's not surrounded by anything else, so there's no other distractions, a clear and obvious focal point, then although we don't have the conditions, I know that I should be able to create something quite dreamy in Photoshop. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's going to be better than if we had the right conditions, but we don't. So we're making the best of it, and I think, again, as I said before, this is something that if you're watching this you can go out and practice yourself, and it's good fun. But you do need the right subject, and I don't think this is quite going to work. So let's move on, see if we can find something else. No, I was hoping there would be something up here because the trees are beautiful, but nothing's so green. I'm surprised everything is still so green. No. You know, you'd think it would be easy, but I can't see the wood for the trees. Now this caught my eye. Again, I don't know if it picks up on the GoPro, but this is what I'm looking for. Hang on. You see this? I saw this through the trees and I thought it was a sapling, but it's not. It's just a branch coming off a bigger tree, but it's orange. Amongst everything else, it stands out because it's orange, and nothing else around here is really orange. It's all still very green. But unfortunately, although this is the kind of thing I'm looking for, it's definitely not going to work because there are far too many distractions, too much dappled light around it, no light hitting the actual branch itself. It's all a bit too chaotic. I'm looking for something similar to this but more orderly. Aye. Okay, actually looks like we might have something here. Don't know if you can pick this up on the GoPro. You see that single silver birch just there with just a flash of yellow. Just a flash of yellow. When I spotted it just before I hit record on the GoPro, there was actually a little bit of sunlight hitting this tree, and that's what really made it shine. And you can see, it doesn't look much at the minute, but this is probably the best I'm going to get. I've been searching for a good couple of hours now, and this is what I found. So we're going to blooming well deal with it, and it's going to look good. well, maybe not. So you see that tiny splash of yellow colour just there. Doesn't look like much. Let me focus on it, hang on. Yeah, that there. It doesn't look like much, but that is what I've been searching for all day. And I think what I've got in mind is going to work quite well. Okay, so the sun is dipping in and out. You'll probably see it as I'm talking to camera now. The sun might come out, but what that's doing is it's just occasionally splashing a bit of light on the leaves, which is fantastic, and that's because the trees are swaying and throwing the shadows everywhere, so it's actually working out in my favour. We can just get a tiny bit of light on that kind of splash of colour. But I'm not going to spend too long talking through what I'm doing. It's all fairly straightforward. I guess the one thing to mention is I'm shooting at ISO 400 f2.8 for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is it's very, very windy, so I don't want any motion blur, so I need a fast shutter speed, hence the ISO 400 to freeze those leaves. The f2.8 is, it softens everything in a good way, so it's going to add to that ethereal, dreamy look that I'm hoping to achieve in Photoshop and in Lightroom, that otherwise, you know, you would get naturally with the perfect conditions of fog and mist and all that stuff, which we don't have today, and that's the point of today's video. So f2.8, ISO 400, and I've just got the splash of colour bang centre in my frame. There's nothing else that's distracting, nothing moving in. It's all about that flash of colour, and I'll be honest with you, kind of looks a bit rubbish. You know, the idea's there, half of the image is there, the other half is going to happen in the edit suite. So I'm going to show this photograph now. I'm going to take it, put it on screen, and then we'll cut back to the office and we'll see exactly what we've done to get the final outcome. And as I've said a million times already in this video, it is good fun and it gets you out into the woods on days that you might not go out because the photography is not going to be that good. Okay, here we go. Focusing on the tree trunk, the birch trunk. Make sure that's nice and sharp. f2.8, ISO 400, 2-second timer. Alright, I'm probably going to shoot a few more images as the sun kind of dips in and out. But yeah, here's the image, and I'll show you exactly how I processed it, and maybe I can articulate better the thought process I've had. Alright, thanks for sticking with me this far anyway. Oh, and here's the sun, bit more light. See, the light just kisses the leaves when it comes out. It's very, very subtle, very, very subtle, but it lifts that yellow colour furthermore. There we go. That is a little bit better than the last image. I'll probably going to do that 20 more times. Alright, bye, 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 bye. Okay, so you have just seen the finished version of that photograph that I took in the woods, and then you saw it revert back to RAW. So this is the RAW file here, and we're going to look at it, and then we're going to look at the edited RAW, and then we're going to take the edited RAW into Photoshop and create the image that you've just seen. So looking at the RAW file, as I said in the field, it doesn't look all that inspiring, but what you've got to remember here is that we're not creating an image of like, you know, an epic view. We're not on a mountain trying to show somebody a beautiful glaciated valley or some amazing light or beautiful rivers and things like that. What we're actually trying to create is something that invokes mood and feeling in anybody who's looking at it. So we don't want somebody to look at this photograph and go, wow, look at that bit of tree. No, what we want is somebody to look at the image and go, whoa, ooh, I'm glad I'm inside where it's warm and I've got the fire on, that kind of thing. You know, we want it to be, it's more about the mood and the feeling. Now, unfortunately, we never had the conditions, which is exactly why I'm making this video. But if we did have the conditions, a bit of fog, bit of light, you know, something like that, then this actually would work. It would work fantastically as a standalone photograph. But the whole point of this video is that we didn't have those conditions, and that you can go out and you can create anything like this. It's great fun, but what I would suggest is that you have something up here in your head already, an idea. If you pre-visualize an idea, go and look for it, find it, process it. Now, if like me, you're not very skilled at Photoshop, don't worry. The steps I'm about to show you to create that final image, they're really easy and they work well with woodland, intimate landscapes. So let's just jump straight into this. This is the RAW file. It's a bit rich, it's a bit too colourful, you know, the greens are a bit too vibrant, and it isn't that great. But let's look at the Lightroom edit of this RAW file.
So already we can see the raw file has taken on a completely different character. It's a bit more moody. There's more focus on that tree. You see that tree much more as a subject, whereas in the raw file, it kind of looks like you're photographing a bit of bush, if we're being honest. But yeah, now all of a sudden it's taken on a darker, almost more sinister atmosphere, which I quite like. And I'll show you how I've done that. I started off actually with a vignette. So the idea was I really wanted to draw attention to the center of the image, and the viewer's eye is always attracted to the brightest part of the image, especially if that's in the center. So to enhance that, what I did first was add a vignette. Now I've just removed the vignette and we're going to reapply it. And if you look at this, the eye still does go to the center, but by adding a vignette, then we've darkened down the edges of the frame, and that's just give that dark kind of tunnel vision feeling, which I quite like. The next thing I did is I played around with the hue, saturation and luminance panels. It was all about color and, finding that flash of yellow in the woods. So I've really enhanced that in these 3 panels just here. And I'm going to show you exactly what I've done, because this is probably the most important step that I took in Lightroom. Starting off with the luminance, I've increased the yellows by +35. By increasing the luminance of the yellows, well, it's fairly self-explanatory. All of the yellow pixels increase in brightness. Saturation, I've changed 3 colors here, and it has made a big difference. So I've increased the saturation of the oranges and the yellows. Again, it's to make the center of the image shine. But more importantly than that, I've decreased the greens. I've decreased the saturation of the greens. Let me reset this. Now, this image with the greens at full saturation, well, not full saturation, but 0, it's too rich, it's too sickly, it's too green. It shouldn't be green, it's autumn, and all this should be blooming well brown and orange. But let's not dwell on that. So what I did was to furthermore increase the contrast and colour, and to draw the eye into the yellow, which right now kind of gets lost in the greens. I desaturated the greens in the image. And if we look at that makes, I believe anyway, that makes the biggest difference to the overall feel of the photograph. So that's pretty much it. What else have I done? Dropped my shadows a bit just to give it a darker feel. I've increased my highlights, which again just increases the brightness of the center of the image, because all of the highlights here are those yellow leaves. And I believe if I go into my Radial Filter tool, I've applied 2 radial filters. The first one is just here, and that is a simple exposure increase of 0.22, which is just going to lift the brightness again. It's almost like the opposite of a vignette. Now, it's the same as a vignette, but done in a different way. So I applied a vignette to the edge of the image, and then I've brightened the center just slightly. If I'd have gone too far, it would have looked weird. But yeah, just a little hint. Again, it's all about drawing the eye into the center of the frame. The second radial filter here is just a little bit of saturation. And that's more or less it. That has given me a really good base file to now take into Photoshop and create those conditions that cruel nature never gave us. So here's the image in Photoshop, and the first thing I'm noticing that I don't like and would like to remove is just this. These are all the gaps in the trees where we can see through to the sky. And if you look, they're just a distraction. So what I'm going to do is with the clone removal tool or the spot healing brush, I'm just going to go around patiently and remove as many as I can. Okay, so we've removed the brightest parts of the sky. Now there are far fewer distractions. I don't need to go in and get rid of every pixel, but just the bigger ones. The next thing I'm going to do is apply what is known in the industry as an Orton effect. An Orton effect essentially bleeds the highlights into the shadows and gives your image a lovely glow. And it works so well with intimate landscapes. It works incredibly well with woodland, because what it does is it creates a soft ethereal feeling, yet you retain all of the detail. So to do that, we're going to create another layer, duplicate the layer. On a Mac it's Command J, that duplicates it. You can see down here we now have 2 layers. So layer 1, the top layer, basically what we're going to do is go to the filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we're gonna just basically increase, add a blur. We don't want it to be too blurry like this, where it's just completely indescript smudge. We want it to be, around I don't know, 27 pixels. You want to be able to see the structure of the image, just like this. I can still recognize it as my photograph. So yeah, usually somewhere between 23 and 27 pixels, but it depends on the size of the sensor. So just play it by ear. Now that we have a blurry image, what we're going to do, image adjustments levels, and we're basically going to crunch the image. We're going to lift the highlights, bring down the shadows, and basically make a very, very sickly image like this. You can get it, you can see those highlights there, they're almost blown out in the center. You can see here they've started to blow out, so as soon as they start to blow out, that's when you pretty much want to stop, and then you want to bring down your shadows like this. So yeah, something like that. And now looking at this, looks ridiculous. But what we're going to do is bring the opacity all the way to 0 and give your eyes a break. Take a couple of minutes, and then you want to come back to your layer and slowly start to reintroduce the opacity. So if I bring this opacity up to like 23%, you see how the image has got a glow? It looks like a proper like 1980s portraiture, a bit of Vaseline on the lens type thing. It's too much, way too much. So bring it back down to 0, give your eyes a break, and just want to slowly start introducing it around about like 10%. And what I find really helpful is just to switch off the layer and just look at the difference it makes. Even 10% is too much. It's too much. Let's bring it down to like 8%. There we go, 8% looks pretty good. If you flick back and forth, you can see it's got a soft glow, but it's not immediately obvious when looking at the image itself. So the next thing I'm going to do, and probably the last thing I'm going to do, is add a lens flare. Now, when you add a lens flare to an image, you've got to be careful, and there's a couple of things to look out for. So for example, if I'm just going to go to Filter, Render, and then Lens Flare and add it directly to the image here, that's it. I'm stuck with this lens flare. I can't move the lens flare, stretch it. I can't even reduce the opacity of the lens flare. It's embedded in the image and I'm stuck with it. So you may be wondering, how do I create a lens flare that I can go on to manipulate? Well, I will tell you. So what we're going to do is create a new layer, a blank layer, and then I'm going to fill it with black. So that is essentially a black layer. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the same lens flare, but I've added it to the black layer just here. And in case you're wondering, the lens flare that I like to use, if I go down here to Render Lens Flare, is the 105mm prime. I find that out of the 4 lens types gives me the most natural glow and the easiest thing to work with. So the problem with all lens flares actually is it gives you these artifacts, which are a bit of a pain. So because I've got this on a black layer, what I can actually do is take the spot healing tool, let's try this, and I can just get rid of them, because we don't actually want those in our image. Now it's going to be a bit more difficult with this big one, but we'll see what we can do. Do we think Photoshop can handle this? Oh no, there we go. Okay, so what we've done is we've just gone around the spot healing tool, very, very loose, fast and shoddily, but we've got rid of those artifacts. The next thing I want to do is change the blend mode, because at the minute it's essentially a black layer with a white glow, and that's no good to anyone. But if we go down to screen, what that does is it makes any blackness in the layer, makes it transparent. So we've changed that to screen, and now we can see the image below it. So you can already see that this has taken on that ethereal look. But remember what I said about subtlety and everything in moderation, and you don't want it to be over the top. So all I'm going to do now is quite simply reduce the opacity of this layer here. And if we switch the layer on and off, you can see even with the opacity like down to 23%, it still makes quite a lot of difference. So we've got to be very careful. Another thing I think I'd like to try is add a warming filter. Now by clicking on this icon here, that essentially is going to pin the filter to the top layer only, which is our lens flare. So we can change the color of the lens flare without changing the color of the image beneath. So I've reduced the opacity of the lens flare to 20%, which is very, very low. But if we go back and forth, you can see the image, it almost looks like a bit of mist is rolling in, a bit of atmosphere, a little bit of something, and it just gives it that dreamy look that I've been going for, you know, pretty much since walking through the woods. But it does, by introducing the lens flare, it has almost made the image a bit bright. So one final thing I think I'm going to do is add a curves adjustment layer. An adjustment layer is essentially, well, it's a layer that it's a layer. What's an adjustment layer? An adjustment layer is a layer with an effect on it. And you can apply that effect to every layer beneath it. And the great thing with adjustment layers are they're non-destructive. So if you don't like it, you can delete it. If it looks good only for a portion of your image, you can go in and erase parts of that layer so that the effect only comes through and a small bit of your image, you know. Man, I don't think I'll be releasing a Photoshop course anytime soon. Alright, so what I'm going to do is use the curve and just bring down the shadows, and just so subtly, just so subtly. And just lift back the highlights. So I've dropped the shadows, lifted the highlights. There we go. That's pretty much it. I think we're done. Wow, this is going to be a long video and I do apologise, but this is the final image. It's moody, it's a little bit dreamy. I would have loved to have had these conditions in real life, but I had great fun going out and exploring and finding this scene and following through with this idea I had of the final image, which is here. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and of course a massive thank you to the sponsors of this video, who are Squarespace. So a big thank you to Squarespace. If you don't know who Squarespace are, well, you use them to build a website. So if you need a photography website to showcase your images, whatever, you know, sell books and calendars and prints and all that good stuff, you can use Squarespace. And the reason that I would recommend them is because it's easy. I know nothing about HTML or coding, yet I can go and build a website and make it look really good and all work fine in pretty much no time at all. So if you need a website, go to squarespace.com/Heaton and give it a free try. And if you like free trial, use the offer code Heaton for 10% off your first purchase. And with that, I'm going to go because we are pushing 30 minutes. And that's too long. It's too long. So if you have stuck with me this long, thank you. And make sure you tune in next time, probably for a shorter video. So until then, thank you for watching and bye for now.